Tommy Robinson, a villain to many, but a hero to some.
What a wonderful man, bringing the justice to these girls. All those poor girls that have been raped and abused.
Stephen Yaxley-Lennon, that's his real name, appeared at the Old Bailey at the end of September. He was sent to jail earlier this year. More than 500,000 people signed a petition calling for his release. His sentence was later quashed, but he still could go back to prison. Tommy Robinson was once leader of the English Defence League, or EDL. These days, he calls himself a journalist, focusing on paedophile grooming gangs, an issue which has gained widespread notoriety after trials of child sexual abuse concluded in Rotherham, Rochdale, Oxford and elsewhere, including a case last year in Canterbury.
The public realise that the full weight of the establishment is coming down on my shoulders because I speak openly and honestly and tell the facts about Islam. We have Islamic rape gangs terrorising this entire country.
He and his supporters believe they're fighting a battle, not just against child abuse, but against a whole religion, Islam, and against an establishment, the police, the courts, the media, which they believe defends rapists while labelling them as racists.
They're calling Tommy Robinson a Nazi because he's putting the light on a load of Muslim fucking nonsense.
Across Europe, political movements with an overtly Islamophobic agenda have entered the mainstream. So far, this has not happened in Britain. But could this movement morph into a political force? It's a question that's not easy to answer, not least because his supporters mostly hate the media. But that too is part of the story. Tommy Robinson is no longer involved in the EDL. His new movement has its origins in the grooming scandals.
I came from just a normal family background, really. I was a confident girl at school. I was good at school, bubbly, had lots of friends, and there was nothing that vulnerable about me apart from the fact that I was, just a child.
Sammy Woodhouse was 14 when she was first raped.
From that moment on, I was abused mentally, sexually and physically for several years. But he was 24, he was known to all services for being a really dangerous person. He weren't just involved in exploiting children, he was involved in just about every crime you can imagine.
Sammy was just one of an estimated 1,400 children who were raped and abused in Rotherham alone, according to a report into child sexual exploitation there between 1997 and 2013. The gang that abused her is now in jail. The report found that most of the victims were young white girls, while most of the perpetrators were of Pakistani heritage. The local authorities completely failed to tackle the problem.
And unfortunately, the very people that was meant to be protecting me, such as social workers and police officers, they didn't, and some of them, they was actually helping him.
Why do you think the people who were supposed to protect you did nothing?
I think there was some professionals trying to raise the alarm, but they was called racist. A lot of people doing this was Pakistani Muslims, and people were scared of that. And I think, a lot of professionals just saw us as little slags, little lovesick teenagers that kept going back and that we was the ones to blame.
Previous warnings about the extent of the abuse were either suppressed or ignored. This story, which happened in other towns and cities as well, is one of the driving forces behind the Tommy Robinson movement. New allegations continue to come to light. Sammy does not support Robinson, but she can understand why others do.
A lot of the people going on these marches, I know some that are victims, that are families, just normal kind of working day people that are just so angry at what's happened. They feel they're not being listened to, they're being ignored, and that the system is corrupt. And they're looking, to go on movements like this because they feel that's the only way that their voices can get heard. Yeah.
Many of the survivors of abuse are still not ready to tell their story publicly. We spoke to two other women, Their views on Tommy Robinson vary. One said she thought he was highlighting an important issue. Another, who was raped by a number of different men, disagreed. She said, "I don't see him marching against my white abusers." Sammy Woodhouse says Tommy Robinson is selective in which cases he chooses to focus on.
If they're going to talk about child rape, about the system and the failures, then they should be talking about it as a whole and not just by Pakistani Muslims. There's, majority of paedophiles are actually white males.
The majority of paedophiles in this country are white men. But go to any Tommy Robinson rally and you'll come away with the impression that child abuse is somehow linked to Islam. And that narrative is now being perpetuated by a national political party.
The rape gang members are predominantly followers of the cult of Muhammad. They justify their crimes to themselves because of the ideology that they follow. Non-cult followers are lesser human beings. Women are the possessions of men. The founder of their cult was himself a paedophile and kept sex slaves.
This is the leader of a party that came third in terms of actual votes cast in the general election in 2015. At the last election, they fared much worse. Is UKIP looking to replicate the successes of overtly Islamophobic European parties, such as that of Geert Wilders in the Netherlands? We wanted to ask Gerard Batten, but he declined to be interviewed for this film. What is clear is that many of Tommy Robinson's supporters feel that we in the media have only one aim: to label them as racists.
Yeah, we're not far right, we're not racist, we're not Nazis, we've got black people here.
Throw people off buildings, we don't do nothing.
Yeah.
Mixed race, been friends for 40 years.
Yeah, and I'm a racist.
How's he racist?
And I'm a racist. How's that a racist?
The BBC are here.
The anger against the media makes it difficult to explore the nuance, the spectrum of opinion within the Tommy Robinson movement. So we went to meet a man who was once close to him.
Labels are dangerous. A lot of things we were saying in the EDL we were deemed as racist. To us personally, we weren't. We were probably anti-Muslim, anti-Islam, definitely, but we weren't being listened to. And I think that's like the rise of the people now on the streets, is because people still aren't being listened to. People are still being labelled.
Ivan has turned his back on Tommy Robinson, but he does say that the media has played a role in shaping the way Islam is perceived among his supporters.
It was Ajahn Chowdhury, really. I think that's what started me on my journey, I guess, on the talk shows, chat shows in the newspapers. He seemed to be the go-to Muslim.
Anjem Chowdhury, welcome to Hard Talk.
Well, I'm joined now by the radical cleric Anjem Chowdhury.
Well, joining us now is Anjem Chowdhury from Allah Khuraba, an organisation.
The stuff he was saying, I kind of bought into that form of that interpretation of Islam. You forget, after Lee Rigby was killed in 2013, he was on the telly the next day, Ajahn Chowdhury.
I find it quite extraordinary that you could not say that you abhorred the scene of him standing, what he had done. He had actually killed a man in the street, and you can't bring yourself to say...
One man killed in the street does not equate to the hundreds of thousands and millions, in fact, who have been slaughtered by the British and American and the foreign policy.
Documentaries as well play a big part, because back in 2008, 2009, there was a documentary called Undercover Mosque.
Tonight on Dispatches, an ideology of bigotry and intolerance spreading through Britain, with its roots in Saudi Arabia.
We Muslims have been ordered to do brainwashing.
On women's rights.
Allah created the woman nutrition.
If she doesn't wear hijab, we hit her.
That programme showed everything back then that we were already thinking. So when we talk about it, we're bad. But when it's on the TV, it's sort of acceptable.
And this is a closed group.
In an age of Facebook and YouTube, the established media has less control over who does and who does not get a voice. Will Balday, a coordinator for the government's anti-radicalisation strategy, Prevent, took us through some of the closed discussion groups online. You find a broad spectrum of opinion.
You know, a lot of them are just people that haven't had a voice before. So it's a broad church, but within that you've also got pockets of traditional far-right extremism. The traditional notion of far-right, I think, is evolving. It's always been people that have taken patriotism towards nationalism, have taken concerns around cultural identity into an actual threat to our cultural identity because of immigration. But what we're seeing now is a more explicitly anti-Muslim movement. And certainly when you look at the social media posts, when you look at the language at the rallies, they're hanging their politics, their ideology explicitly on an anti-Muslim agenda.
Should we be worried?
I might be the wrong person to ask. I have quite a pessimistic view of the immediate future. I feel as if common sense is being drowned out and the platforms are being given over to the extremist ideologues.
And that's from somebody who works in Prevent?
Yeah.
Gerard Batten has said he'd like Tommy Robinson to join UKIP. Under current party rules, he's banned because of his previous association with the EDL. Some say such a move would condemn the party to the margins. But others look at European parties that have adopted explicitly Islamophobic agendas and see electoral success. Meanwhile, Sammy Woodhouse sees people playing politics with her story.
A lot of people jumped on the bandwagon and just tried to use it for their own gain. And as well, there's a lot of people taking credit for things that they haven't done. Now, if we're going to be really honest, the people that have exposed scandals throughout the country is survivors contacting the media. And when you get people such as, Britain's First or Tommy Robinson and other people saying, well, actually, we exposed Rotherham and we exposed other places. Well, no, you didn't. And I do think that they have highlighted the issue. They've, raised awareness on it, but they didn't expose it, and it is disrespectful to take credit for what we've done.